So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Full Potential Live Show with Nick Wagner Sr. And really excited to have my former boss. I would say a current mentor and definitely a big influence on my professional career, Eric Consolazio, joining me tonight. So Eric, thank you for making time.
Good evening, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. And it was funny because my wife, Melanie, she's like, you're gonna have so much fun with Eric tonight on this. She's like, you guys are gonna have a blast. I'm like, you're absolutely right, because we have so much to talk about, and you've had such a unique career with so many twists and turns, kind of like the plot of a movie, which we'll get into. So,
yeah.
So why don't you just share, Eric, a little bit about yourself? So just real quick, who are you? And then we'll obviously dive into a lot more about your background. But if someone comes up to you and asks you, you introduce yourself to someone for the first time, what do you usually say?
I usually say, hi, I'm Eric Consolazio.
And you do what?
And if I was to ask who I am,
yeah,
right now I'm entrepreneur at large.
All right, that's fair.
So, I guess I've been in the healthcare industry for decades prior to that. Majority of my career with the big healthcare companies, but Cigna as really the cornerstone of my career.
But now you're telling people you're an entrepreneur. Okay, I think that's fair, and we'll get into why that is in a little bit. And I think I told you, Eric. So we're recording this live. We're streaming it to LinkedIn. We're streaming it to YouTube, and then we will release this as a video on YouTube as well as on all major podcast platforms as audio only. So Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, you name it, you'll be able to go find it. And then you won't get to see your smiling face, but people will get to hear the conversation. So we'll have audio as well. So
we have that many people going to watch us. Makeup.
Yeah, I know. When I went from audio to having video, it was kind of funny because people started worrying about what they looked like. And I don't have a makeup person or a hair person here at my house, so it's kind of unfortunate. But
you don't need a hair person.
All right, but I need a makeup person. But that's a whole separate topic. So let's jump into your career, right? So why don't we start way back? We'll start at the beginning, and we'll eventually get to the point where we talk about how you recently created your own movie, and I think people will be interested in hearing that story. But why don't we start way back when you were growing up? Like, what did Eric Consolazio want to do when he was older? Like, what was your dream job as a kid?
So you wouldn't believe this, but my mother told me that from the youngest of age, when they asked me, other kids would say they wanted to be a police officer or a baseball player or whatever. Right. And I would say that I wanted to be a businessman and drive a Jaguar. And
why a Jaguar?
At that point in time, I guess I had seen the latest Jaguar that was out on the road, and that was it. Just captivated me. So I have a Jaguar in my garage as we speak.
So success.
Yeah.
So why a business person? I mean, was there was someone in your family a business person, a relative, a mentor, a friend, a family friend?
Yeah. So my father owned a marina. He sold boats, and it sounds very romantic, but it's actually a real tough business. And so we there's more down years than up years in the boat business. But he always was one of those people who fought really hard and worked really hard, and he really didn't have the tools to run a business, but through sheer guts and a bit of narcissism, he was able to survive. And we had very let's just call it humble roots. We didn't have much money growing up. But yeah, that was that kind of, I have to thank him for all his many faults, of which there are many, or were many. He just passed away about a year ago. He taught me that entrepreneurship, that drive, that self-confidence. Yeah.
And was so I always find it fascinating for people that grew up with entrepreneurial parents, because I think it usually kind of goes one of two ways. You're either completely turned off by being an entrepreneur because you saw how hard it was for your parents, or you learned from them and said, one day I'm going to do that, and I want to be my own entrepreneur. I think it kind of goes either way. Was that your first job growing up, was working at the marina? Did you work for him at any point?
Oh yeah. It was cheap labor for him.
What did you do for him?
Oh, well, gee whiz. Do you ever see that show, Dirty Jobs?
Yes.
That's pretty much what we had to do. You name it, barnacles on the bottom of boats, clean out bilges, some of the ickiest stuff you could imagine. But I'd also dive down into the water and with my diving gear and repair props, or
Wow.
I was also, I think, and when I was about 12 years old, I sold my first boat at the New York Boat Show in New York City.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I was there dating myself with a two-piece corduroy suit with bell bottoms and platform shoes.
I bet you looked great. I'm actually, it's unfortunate we don't have a picture of that.
Yeah.
So you were, and let me ask this. So he was an entrepreneur. He had the business.
Mhm.
Was his plan for you to stay working with him, after you graduated from high school? Was his plan for you go do something else? Was his plan for you to go to college, join the military? Like, how did that conversation go at home between you and your parents on what your life would be after high school?
Well, my father was always one of those, well, someday, son, this will be all yours. And I'm look around and say, well, what? We're on the brink of bankruptcy. So do you want me to take on your debts? I don't think so. Right. So I never wanted to be in the boat business. As a matter of fact, when it's kind of funny because, when people think of what they want in life, a boat is probably number 4 or 5 on the list, right? House, car, boat.
Right.
Boat is like number 20 on my list. I'm so tired of boats. Love the water. Will not, boats are a tough thing, but he was very, 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 very influential on me. Some people say I'm scary. I'm more like him than I admit. So I think.
And so when you were in high school, was your plan always to go to college? What was your plan for after high school? Did your parents go to college? What was the conversation like?
So I always expected to go to college. I am the only one in my family, between my parents and my siblings, to ever get a 4-year degree, and I am the only one in my extended family that I know of who got a master's. So,
wow.
So it's kind of one of those things that's a little unusual. We really we're very much a blue collar family,
And what did you end up going to school for? So what did you go to school for, and where did you go to school?
Well, for the first 2 years at Pace University, my major was partying. So had a really good time. Then I decided, after sitting down with the assistant dean, where we had a heart-to-heart about some antics on campus, I decided to buckle down and got a degree in marketing.
It was marketing, okay.
Yes, marketing. Surprisingly, they also though had a computer sciences program there at Pace, and so that's kind of where my first taste of it was, even though I didn't get a major in it. I had already switched my major too many times, so went with marketing, and then actually for my graduate degree, for my master's, I went to NYU and got finance and international business. Now, again, that was also steeped in computer systems as well. As a matter of fact, the thesis project was an IT-based program that we all had to simulation program that we all had to participate in.
Did you get your master's right after your undergrad?
No. Really kind of interesting there. We didn't have enough money. I mean, for me in undergrad, I paid my last tuition payment, literally scraping up change from the back seat of my car, underneath like an old pizza that was probably from the Mesozoic era. So literally paid it off with rolls of coins at the bursar's office.
Wow.
I then went to the talk about influential people. The chairman of the department, the kind Mr. Wallingford, whom I was always late for class at. Always sauntered in a little too late. Here's the guy, with the, and I had, I had the greaser look back then. But I went to the chairman of the department afterwards and said, Dr. Wellingford, I'd really like to go to NYU. And I would like you to see if you could give me a recommendation. And he put a warm arm around me and said, there, Eric. I just want to let you know that you're not NYU material and you can't go.
Wow.
It's just, you can't do that. And so I walked out of there without a recommendation, but with the firm belief that nobody can tell me what I can't do. And 2 years later, I was accepted to NYU and had their night program while I was working during the day. And in 3 years, got my master's.
Yeah. So, and I want to ask you that, and I'm not surprised at all that that motivated you based off of my knowledge of you and your personality. So what did you end up working? Where did you work? So you graduated with a marketing degree. You said you were going to school at night for your master's. Where were you working at this time when you graduated from school? What was that first job out of college?
Believe it or not, it was very interesting. I got a job at a Japanese company.
Okay.
And at the time when I graduated, was a much different person than I am now. Much more hot-headed, much more quick-tempered, and the people there, particularly a Mr. Wakino, taught me patience and taught me how to be a professional. I had, I worked the phones a lot there for what we had to do in import and export, and mostly of technology. And I would get so upset that I would slam the phone down. I broke 2 phones in 1 year. And after the second phone, they decided they weren't going to replace it. So I literally had a phone without any plastic casing on it for over a year. And they taught me that you really do have to have the patience. You have to moderate yourself and look at things much more objectively if you're going to be successful. So I owe an awful lot to them for that.
They don't teach you that.
I owe an overturned liver to them too, because they did know how to party. Yeah.
No, they don't teach you a lot of those things in college, which is interesting. It really is that, on the job training. So you worked there and you got your master's at the same time at night at NYU. And how long were you at this Japanese firm for?
Oh, geez, I was at Hitachi for about 5 years.
5 years.
About 5 years, and then left to join Arthur Andersen, which is now known as Accenture.
Correct.
And right with a master's in my pocket, made the huge career leap to go into what I always wanted to go into. And I went into technology consulting. There was a whole number of people there at Accenture who, influenced my career there. But I think the best advice that I got was that the most valuable person in the technology world is a person who knows the business. That 1-2 punch is
right.
What will make you successful. And so we were all asked to take on majors, as it were, in certain industries. And so I took on insurance and later graduated to healthcare. And that's where now I started doing first at, insurance, P&C type of things. And then later on with Aetna and Cigna, United, et cetera.
So just so my audience can get a sense of it, when you talk about technology consulting, for people that don't know what that is, how would you describe technology consulting to someone that's never been in that field?
Technology consulting is the ability, just like almost any other job. What you really are doing is looking to find and apply solutions to business problems. And technology uses technology to apply the benefits of that to solve business problems. And if you're doing technology and not solving a business problem, then you have to question what you're doing.
So when you had this passion for technology, it seems like, since you were since you were in college, what did you do a lot with technology at your father's business? Did you do a lot with technology growing up in high school? Like, how did you get introduced to technology originally that drove this passion that you've had for your career?
So there was the technology was in school. I won't go into how how far in the dark ages I started in technology. Um, but my first course actually had the old computer cards,
Yep.
cards, and I was rather clumsy, so I always got it mixed up. But um, what what ended up happening was that in the automation of the division there at the Japanese company, I really got more steeped into technology. When I went into consulting at Accenture Anderson Consulting, um, I was the only one who knew how to operate a PC.
Oh,
Because
wow.
PCs were back in the '80s. You have to think about this, right? So I'm the age of Alex Keaton, right, in Family Ties. So back there, there was a PC sitting in the corner that no one was using.
Yeah.
And I was the only one who knew how to use it. I was the only one who knew how to use a spreadsheet. I was the only one who knew how to connect it to a printer, to a network.
Yeah.
And
Definitely an advantage for you.
definitely advantage. And that's another key is find the gray space. In your career, um, over there at Accenture, uh, there were a whole ton of people who knew mainframe, and I was never going to know mainframe better than those folks. But I found here's a niche. Here's a niche. And later in my career, I found it again. You look for those opportunities. Now, I would love to say that I was very prescient, and a visionary in that, I knew what, technology was going to turn into and how it was going to shape our society. What I was really looking for was something unique that I could do that
Yeah.
differentiated me. And the same thing with the internet. I was really looking at the time to be able to distribute reports worldwide at an instant, right? And so back then, there was no medium by which you could do that. And it sounds pretty simple now, but sending HTML reports across the world at the touch of a button is child's play nowadays, but was black magic back then. And so
Yeah.
I made a fair amount of a career out of some pretty simple stuff to start. But was just recognizing the advantages of the technology. I became the internet and the microsystems internet, and then later mobile expert in the firm.
So how long were you at Accenture for? What was the
Oh, gee whiz! There is a whole series of consulting firms that I
Oh, there are. Okay.
yeah, and because I'm a pretty old salt, so rather than go through that, what I would say is that eventually, I spent time at Price. I was at Price Waterhouse right before Cigna, and I was there and flying all over the world, showing people how to implement internet-based systems, and so that's when I got the call by a person named Andrea Anania, who really is she's a polarizing figure in Cigna history, but she really gave me the opportunity to come in there and really supported us in what we had to do to bring Cigna from the dark ages to a technology leader in the internet space.
And
And
that was the early 2000s, correct?
yes, yeah.
So what made you leave the consulting firms to join a company to just focus on that one company? Because I think the thing people love about consulting is you get to work on all different types of organizations and different projects. What made you eventually say, you know what, it's time for me to go, work for one company and focus on one problem?
So I think first of all, consulting was a huge advantage for me. I got such a broad-based experience across technologies, across industries, and across people, that really helped me out as my career progressed. But I think being able to dedicate and have true ownership of the solution is what I wanted to do. And I think were going to ask at some point, or you have asked me in the past, like, why healthcare?
Yeah.
This industry versus any other. And my response to that is, I could have easily worked for a company that makes Angry Birds and maybe or Candy Crush, or the latest fad, and I could have probably made some really serious money out of it. But is that really what you want to be known for? And when you are finally ready to turn the last page, you look back there and say, what's been your impact on others? And I think that healthcare, and particularly at Cigna, was my opportunity to actually improve the lives of literally millions of people. And I get to say, 20 years later, that mission accomplished.
Right.
We really have. We affect and Cigna through mycigna.com affects the lives of people every day, hundreds of thousands of people, and so millions of people every year. And so I'm very, very proud of that. And eventually, as we progressed, almost all customer-facing systems and technologies were consolidated underneath that one organization, and we were really able to get more towards that holistic experience for the customer. And being able to pull all those channels together and have them be a consistent face to the customer and improve a person's life, no matter how they wanted to contact you. I mean, you can't ask for better than that.
So when you got asked to come to Cigna in the early 2000s, what did they task you with? What was the, did they tell you, Eric, come build a web portal, and that was what you were told to do, or was it more ambiguous than that?
No, I mean, nobody even knew what a portal was back then. What they basically said was, we want to. Back at that point in time, Cigna had literally no online presence and was losing business to companies like Microsoft because we didn't have any, online self-service capabilities. So aside from maybe the 401k division. So they just said, hey, listen, we want you to meet and we want you to leapfrog the competition. And I don't think they actually believed it. They didn't think it was going to happen. But, they said, Eric, this is what we want you to do. And, they said, whatever, if it gets anywhere close, it's better than what we got. And surprise, surprise, in about 2.5 years, we really surprised a lot of folks. And we really were the best in the industry. And as far as I'm concerned, aside from a few years here and there, over that history, Cigna's been a leader in that area.
So you took a team and built the first iteration of the MyCigna online website that Cigna customers use today, way back almost 20 years ago.
Right.
Which, I think it's funny you mention it, right? You sending HTML, reports around the world is not a big deal now, but when you built that website, you and the team, that was a big deal because it was. We take all these things for granted now, but it was, in 2001 and 2002, it was a lot different than it is today. And, just how you used the internet was very different. And that was very forward thinking probably at the time.
Right. And it really required a coordination across the entire company because we were tying together and have, tied together literally dozens of back-end sources of information and transactional systems. So when you think that you have to tie together 30 different back-end systems at any one given time and do it in sub-second response time, that's that was kind of the challenge. And that's what happens on a daily basis.
What was it like having a team of people and trying to create something that a lot of people probably didn't really understand at that point. A lot of people, to your point, might not have actually thought it was going to happen. When you actually made it happen, what was the reaction from the organization and your leadership that you actually did what they wanted you to do? Was it shock? Was it what was that like? What was the outcome of
that? Very kind of interesting is that there have been good times and bad times in Cigna's history, but when we announced the original My Cigna, and along with that was a deal that we'd inked with Yahoo at the time, and Yahoo was kind of like the Google of the age back then. The Cigna stock went up $2 that day.
Wow,
that was like $300 million in net worth of the company.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal, and it was celebrated across the company. It was on CNBC, you name it. That it got rapidly overshadowed by some of the darker days of Cigna during the era of the transformation initiative way back when. But for that brief shining moment, we were we pretty much had surprised everybody, including everybody across the industry with what we'd done.
So you mentioned that you eventually owned other things, including the mobile space, right? And as someone who worked for you, I heard you talk about mobile quite often. And I think that was one of those other really big shifts. I think the internet was obviously a big shift for technology and for business in a lot of industries. And then mobile was I think was the next big shift for a lot of technology and industries. And you always made the comment that people never left without their phone, right? Like you can forget where your keys are, you can forget where your wallet is, but you never forgot where your phone is.
Right.
Which is why you always said the phone was
where your wife is. You forget where your phone is.
And you always said that was why you thought the phone was really the next important part of the technology journey. And at the time when you were saying all this, no one at Cigna owned mobile. There was no mobile, right? The Cigna didn't have a mobile app. Right. So I think earlier you said, which is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever given, I've ever heard you give, was you just declared yourself the mobile expert and said, I'm the mobile expert and we're going to do this.
Right. So, what had ended up happening was, and this is a great, reinforcement to all you other folks out there for your careers. And that is find the unoccupied space.
Yeah.
And instead of fighting people for existing turf, find that new place and own it. And it may be uncomfortable because it's change, but eventually it will provide a lot of opportunity for you and others. So when I actually came back to Cigna, I'd left, going to Gartner as CIO there, and then tried a business venture, which was a little tough getting off the ground. So came back to consulting at Cigna, and then was hired back. And when the reason we became the experts at mobile was they were about to do the email release across the company about my return and what I was in charge of. And I said, if you could just add mobile and social media right at the end of this sentence. And they go, okay.
And no one told you this was what you were responsible for. No one told you that you were going to do this. This was just your decision.
Right. And they said, well, nobody else is responsible for it. Sure, here. And that was it. And then the email went out, and there you go. We were the center of excellence for mobile. Now, then it was, oh, gee whiz, I guess we got to learn how to do mobile. So there was a scramble there for a while. But it all ended well.
But I think that is really, really great advice for so many people, because to your point, so many people fight to try to be what other people already are. And your whole point is try to find, either that niche space or that new technology, that new space that no one's really looking at, and go figure it out.
Right. Right.
Which which seems simple when you think about it, but I think to your point is very terrifying for a lot of people because it is an unknown.
It is an unknown. It's a lot of change. And that's the other key, piece of advice for everybody out there for their career. And that is embrace change. Embrace change. And it all depends on your experiences with change. Some people, when they experience change, bad things happen. For me, with a positive attitude, every time things changed in my life, things changed for the better. So, and I made sure they changed for the better. And I think we have to all understand that, there's going to be this huge amount of uncertainty. But it's like, don't let anyone tell you who you are and what you can't do. And that's the worst thing anybody could ever tell me, was I couldn't do something. And it's not that you can do everything. It's that you need to find out for yourself what you can do and what you can't do. You don't have anybody tell you. And you go off into that gray space. You go off into that, that cloud of uncertainty, and you forge your path. And you may win some and you may lose some. But in the end, it will be you who determines your fate. And you who will form your career through change. And that's the best advice I can give you, is like, have the confidence to try. You may not succeed or persevere in the end, but if you have a work ethic, if you have the determination, and you have, the tools, your God-given talents will take you as far as you can.
No, I think that's well said. I think to your point, a lot of people are paralyzed by change, but your whole mantra here is try to embrace it and think of it in a positive way, and it can actually be very, very powerful. So
absolutely.
So when you were at Cigna, you managed some very large teams. So I'm curious, you went from being a consultant, which I'm going to guess you were managing much smaller teams than your time at Cigna, because at Cigna you were managing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at one point. What is your advice for people out there, or some guidance on the experience of managing teams of probably almost 1,000 people at some point or more in your career? Right. How do you, that seems very overwhelming to a lot of people. How do I want to hear what some of your advice would be about that, including your famous term snorkeling.
Well,
I think this is important for people to hear.
Yes. So for me, the scale is the great challenge, right? And the great reward, because you can move mountains when you have the right people. And that's one of the reasons instead of going to startups, I decided to pursue my opportunities through corporate life. I had many of my friends, as I was, as our careers were progressing, going off into their own startups. Some succeeded, others failed. But I always thought that, if I really wanted to change the lives of millions of people and accomplish the most in life, I needed to do it in an environment with the resources and the people that would help us get it done. The key thing here is you have to surround yourself, before I get to snorkeling, you have to surround yourself with the right people. And here is my plug for diversity, right? And this is not like the corporate speak diversity speech, all right? Because this is one that's actually really rooted in success.
Okay.
And that is, if you surround yourself with people like you will fail. Mm-hmm. You need to, literally, you will fail, especially when you're stepping out into the unknown. You need to complement yourself with people with different skills and different backgrounds, and different perspectives. Yeah. And in only that way are you truly, truly going to succeed. And this is not, like a corporate mandate speech, right? I'm not in Cigna anymore. And I'll actually give you a little taste of this with my latest venture. And I'm actually in the film business now, the entertainment industry, and I'm in there. I'm in it, and we've produced a film because somebody said, there's no way, Eric, you can do this. Well, I guess that's my next place. I guess that's my next stop. But the team that put this together, the cast of the film, is a diverse cast. It's actually recognized. The film is recognized by the Screen Actors Guild as being one of diversity. The people behind the camera are people of diversity. You know, the director of the film is a female Asian, which is almost unheard of in the genre of the film that we've made. But I think I think all that diversity, all those backgrounds, really helped make and are helping making it very much a success. So the first is surround yourself with great people, especially ones that can really fill in your personal flat spots. And for me, I have many, right? So I need to surround myself with really good folks. Related to the second piece, and this is where people fail. People fail in scale. I was getting back to scale. I know, Nick, I will eventually always get back to your question, but but people fail as the scale increases one of two ways. They either over delegate or under delegate, right? They're either micromanaging and collapsing under a crushing amount of work, or they're over delegating and disconnected from what's going on. So, you know,
that's how you look at the spectrum of, you know, over versus under.
Yes. And so how do you drive that in between? And the first is hearkening way back. Know the business, know the content of what you're doing. If you have systems, you know your systems. And if you know the business, then you have that base. The second piece is, you know, dive into detail when it makes sense, but remember to come up for air. And that's what snorkeling is. You know, snorkeling is being able to pick and choose your fights and dive down into the details in select spots, and then come back up for air and look at it from the larger view, kind of going down into below the trees and then coming back above the treetops to make sure that you don't lose yourself in the woods.
Yeah, no, I think I think a lot of people lose that ability, or even that perspective when they end up managing these huge teams. And if you can't get down and really understand what's going on, it's going to be really hard to be able to explain to the business what you guys are really doing.
Right.
If you're not able to do that. So no, I think that's great advice. So why don't we pivot from there to this whole idea of the background behind you that says Rick Mystery, and then the other thing behind you that says cinema, and we'll talk about the movie. So I want to talk about the music business and the movie business, because I don't think a lot of people would expect someone with your background to end up being a musician and have a band and be making a horror movie. So,
or have a palm tree with a fake
or have a light up palm tree. So why don't we start with the Rick Mystery piece? Who is Rick Mystery, and how did Rick Mystery become a thing while you were working at Cigna and had a full-time job?
Right. I think, you know, the need to be creative and the need to create things is something that's always been in my blood, you know. But I think for those out there, being creative is really that muscle of the mind that you really have to exercise. And even if you can't apply whatever you want to do outside of work, if you're creative, if you're creating things, that creativity will eventually apply itself through that muscle, right? That is your mind. In the work environment, you will see those opportunities. You will know that you can create something potentially out of nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rick Mystery is actually a band. It's a blues band, blues and jazz band. That and the reason it's called Rick Mystery is because I needed a pseudonym. Because when when people are looking you up online, they want to see you as a professional. They don't want to see you as a professional and dressed up in a fedora. So um, so thank goodness for Rick Mystery, and we actually had a band. We formed a band. The band has I don't know. We haven't been doing the band for about a year now because we've been busy doing a movie, year and a half. But we had at one point about 75,000 fans across 28 countries. So a lot of fun, writing music and playing with a band and playing with some extremely talented people. So that is Rick Mystery. This is cinema. And what ended up happening was as I was at Cigna, I produced as executive producer for a short film, and it actually got quite a few awards in the horror genre. And what ended up happening was someone told me, well, that's a nice short, but you could never do a feature film. So we decided.
Challenge accepted.
There you go. You can't write and you can't produce, and this is all too complicated for you. Why don't you just go off in a corner there and go back to healthcare? And so after I retired, we produced a movie. The movie's called A Deadly Legend. It's a feature film, and it stars Corbin Burnson from L.A. Law and Psych, Lori Petty from Orange is the New Black, way back, Point Break, and Tank Girl, and Judd Hirsch from Days of Taxi and Independence Day. So they're in the film, along with a few other notable characters. And the bottom line is, we're a construction crew unearths Stonehenge of North America, and chaos ensues. A little bit of a thriller, and we have completed the movie. We are going out to Berlin in about a month, and we will be releasing A Deadly Legend in 2020. So
I have a lot of questions, and for those watching live and those listening on YouTube and on the podcast, probably thinking, how did this IT technology consultant end up making a horror movie that's going to be distributed in movie theaters across the country, right? Like that's a big leap. So I have a couple questions coming to mind. So obviously the short was kind of your dry run to making a full feature film, which I think a lot of probably the same challenges. Obviously, much shorter, smaller production crew, less money, less time, etc. But do you feel that a lot of your corporate experience and your consulting experience and just your career that you put together helped you make this happen? Do you think did you use a lot of what you learned in the corporate world to make this movie?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think it gave me an advantage because people who make films don't really know about contracts, and a lot of people who make films don't know about budgets and sticking with budgets and accounting and the discipline of keeping to a schedule and a plan. So there are a lot of most films, by the way, kind of this. It almost mirrors IT projects. There are more IT projects that don't fulfill expectations than do, and there are a majority of films that get started never get completed.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. They run out of something, run out of time, run out of money, bad contracts, you name it. So it's a project, and so we treated it as a project.
Right.
So we did things a lot more complicated than a film. In what we've done throughout the years at Cigna. So new content, obviously huge learning curve, lots of mistakes, but you learn from your mistakes. And I think this is maybe one of my last points to the folks who are thinking about their careers, and that is, I have a pretty darn good record of success. And why is that? It is because I learn from my missteps before they become huge failures. So always learn to adapt.
Yeah.
Always learn from your missteps and mistakes. You can correct them as long as you recognize them and understand that you're not always going to make the right choice, but not acknowledging that and not correcting it and not going down the right path is what will eventually make you fail. And so, people say, we should celebrate failure. Absolutely not. We should not celebrate failure. I think that's absolutely a horrible thing to say. But what we should do is celebrate what our smaller mistakes and missteps and understand those and take those to heart, and not be defensive against that, but really take it to heart. And also, don't surround yourself with yes people.
Right.
Surround yourself with people who push back and be open enough to take the criticism and the input. And oh, by the way, in the movie business, when you're doing a movie, there's a lot of feedback, and it's all for the better. When you're developing systems, when you're developing business solutions, there's a lot of feedback that will eventually make it better. Do you take all the feedback? No. Do you stick to certain places? Absolutely. Do you want to keep, do you want to keep yourself on the right path? Yeah. But I mean, that feedback makes a huge difference. And that's part of surrounding yourself with good people.
No, I think that's well said. So why don't we finish this? We'll do a couple rapid fire questions, then we'll wrap it up. And again, I really appreciate you making time. So, biggest accomplishment of your career?
Well, I think we talked about it. My Cigna, I think, was the longest lasting and most impactful. On literally not only myself, but millions of people. And that's thanks not to a big team of people who got us there, right?
Absolutely.
And who have carried the torch and made it even better since I've left. So,
biggest failure of your career?
I knew you were going to ask that question. And I have to tell you, I don't really have a big failure in my career on the business side. I just don't.
Because you learned from those missteps when they were little before it got big.
Absolutely, and you learn from the mistakes of others too. You look at them, and you look at others and see how others have succeeded and failed, and you take those to heart as well. So I really don't have any significant failure, believe it or not, to point to. I will say this, because there, I would count it as a failure, and that is, there's the work-life balance, and I am not the best person for you to emulate for work-life balance, and I would say, you think you got all the time in the world, and you really think there's time on the back end if you work your fingers to the bone to celebrate it at the end. And life has got different plans for you, and so my regret is that my wife, my first wife, was taken from me far earlier than anybody would have expected, and I lost years that way, years that I thought I was going to make up on the back end. And so really, kind of appreciate that, appreciate your family, appreciate, those around you, and carve out that time if you can, make rules around that and stick to those rules. And you know what? I will tell you that if you haven't pressed the reset button once in your life, at least, you haven't lived long enough. And it will happen to every single one of you. And whether it's on the business side, you press the reset button, or on the personal side, you're going to have to learn to change, and you're going to have to learn to adapt and move on. And I have a beautiful wife now, years later, beautiful wife now, and having a great time. and I have very, very few regrets overall.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's great advice. And so we'll close with this, Eric. I always ask my guests this question for the last question. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to my listeners that you think has helped you reach your full potential, that you think has helped you been so successful over all these years?
Watch the Nick Wagner Full Potential live show.
I appreciate that, but and that might be so. We'll take that piece of advice plus something else. So, what's the one thing you would say to people? And you might have said it already, but what would that one thing you try to hammer home in people's minds?
I would say manage with empathy. Understand what motivates other people. Don't look at things squarely just through your own eyes. And understand what motivates other people and how you can get those motivations to align with what you want to accomplish. And I'm not saying you're sympathetic, and I'm not saying you want to be best buddies with anybody. What I'm really saying is, though, understand other people and how other people will be motivated, what makes them tick.
Right.
And by understanding that, you will all find common ground by which you will move mountains.
I think it's a great point, because it's not always money. It's not always monetary. And I think a lot of people assume it is, but there's a lot of other ways that you can motivate people that are not cash.
Yes. Cash is not it. Cash pays the bills.
Right.
In the end, people want to know that they're part of something special.
Yeah. And they care about. Yeah. So again, thank you so much. You know how much I've valued my relationship with you and all I've learned from you over the years.
Watch that Nick Wagner Full Potential live show.
You were so kind. So thank you. I will make sure that we get in the show description, however you want people to get in touch with you, whether that's LinkedIn or your personal website or the movie website, whatever you want me to share. We'll make sure we share that. And then everyone will have to look out for the movie in 2020, later this year.
Yes, and I actually have a small part in it, believe it or not.
I'm not surprised. So Eric Consolazio, thank you so much. I really truly appreciate you joining tonight.
God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.